back to the fourth Elets Pharma Leadership Summit. Post an enlightening morning with prominent industry thought leaders, we now move ahead to our second panel discussion on championing change within the organization towards a digital future, the CIO Perspective. Joining us today, we have Mr. Pavitran Ayala, Chief Information and Digital Officer, Newland Laboratories Limited. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much. Mr. Ratul Rastogi, VP and Head IT, Aptar Life Sciences. Welcome, Mr. Rastogi. Thank you so much for joining
Hi,
us. Hi. Mr. Venkat Srinivas, Chief Information Officer, RAChem Pharma Private Limited. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. And Mr. Srinivas will be moderating this discussion.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Yogesh Deshpande, Head Operations IT, Alembic Pharmaceuticals Limited. Welcome, Mr. Deshpande. Thank you so much. And Mr. Vivek Mahendra, Chief Information Officer, Stratmed. Thank you, Mr. Mahendra. We look forward. Thank you. So, as technology becomes the driving tool in reshaping and redrawing the pharma's landscape, the role of CIOs has attained prime significance. And this session will aim to understand how digitization is being integrated into the journey of an organization towards a digital future. So, over to you, Mr. Venkat Srinivas, for taking the discussion forward.
Thank you, Garima. Good afternoon, everyone. As Garima said, I think the technology has been changing, and especially last 2 years, the changes became a constant. And as a human beings, we don't like being a change, and especially in the disruptive change coming in on the way, and as it towards the digitization, and then the pharma is more and more adopting the digital change. That's where we gets into a resistance. But the people or the organizations which are embarked on the change, which really progressed well, and then they're more successful. And with the modern in any organization, the technology has been playing a key role with the change management, and that's where we actually have our colleagues, the fellow panelists, will actually talk about on their journey within their on the industry and towards the digital initiatives, what they've been doing it. And also we'll come back and see how we want, and also we're happy to take your questions if to answer anything which are you are facing a challenge towards the digital transformations. Again, to the CIO, as I said, the champion the change with an organization towards the digital future. In the CIO perspective, CIO plays a key role. Now, you see most of the CIOs as part of the boardroom and the strategy defining and towards the digitalization, because that's what the organizations and the management started seeing the importance of the digital transformation. That gives an edge and also will be competitive in the market. So I would like to go around and give an introduction. Each of my panelists. I'll start with my introduction. As Gaima said, I'm Venkat Srinivas. I'm a CIO of an RAChem Pharma. I have around two decades of experience in specifically in pharma. Been there 15 to 16 years in apotex. So one of the generic North American pharmaceuticals, and then prior to that, there are a couple of other companies I've been worked. So I've been here in this in RAChem for the last 1.5 years. And over to Pavitran, if you can give a brief introduction, each of you, and then we'll take up on the question.
Yeah, thanks, Srini. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Pavitran Ayala. I have about 20 plus years of experience in the IT industry. The first 10 years, I was more into the IT companies. In the last 10 years, I'm more or less playing a CIO role. So prior to associated with Newland, I worked for companies like Sony, Dell, HP, Floso, and Yokogawa. Currently, I'm playing a CIDO role in Newland Laboratories. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavitran. May I request Atul, please can you give a brief introduction on yourself?
Sure, Venkat. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Atul Rastogi, and I head the ID services at Aptar Life Sciences. Prior to coming at Aptar, I was associated with Computer Sciences Corporation. I worked there for nearly a decade, and coming to Aptar, adds another industry to my portfolio. So I've been here for the last 5+ years, and we have been working here to champion the digital landscape within the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul. Thank you for giving an introduction. So I'll move on to Yogesh. Please, can you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Srini. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yogesh Deshpande. I am the head of IT for Alembic Pharmaceuticals. I have about more than 2 decades of IT experience. Last 2 years, I am with Alembic Pharmaceuticals, leading the digital transformation effort out here. Prior to that, I have been working in IT companies. More than a decade of that working in providing consulting and solutions to the quality and manufacturing in pharma.
Thank you, Yogesh. I think Yogesh has can bring the views from the both the side as a partner as well as a customer. Uh, welcome to you, Yogesh, and to the board.
Thanks.
May I move on to Vivek? Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I am currently working as the CIO with StratMed, which is India's first group purchasing organization. But personally, as maybe Yogesh and a few others, I started my journey as a business process consultant, specifically in IT services and technology firms to start with. Uh, but at least for the last maybe 15 years or so, associated very deeply with the pharma organization, total of about 27 years of working experience, typically in areas around system validation and assurance, product and process quality, specifically areas around clinical trials, and maybe very recently in areas around using technology such as maybe blockchains for the phase three clinical trials, as well as maybe areas around pharma and life sciences industry 4.0 adoption. So that's typically what I've been doing, and look forward to a very exciting engagement with all of you.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to go with Pavitran. If you probably we see that there's a buzz going on an industry talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, or big data analytics. These are the game changers, and everybody talks. This is a part of their roadmap and the strategy. Just wanted to understand, Pavitran, from your perspective, how do you feel there's an impact is created in your organizations or overall in the industry that, especially I'm talking about AI and big data, other data analytics is played a key role on overall on the digital journey, and what's the success story?
Yeah, thanks, Venkat. Maybe before I get into the topic, I'll just slightly cover about the CIO role, how it is evolving in the last 10 years. So if you see the CIO, like traditionally more a custodian of technology or network or licenses or IT budgets. Now the new CIO or CIDO or CDO, whoever it is, more tied with the vision and the digital strategy and also the business outcomes. So the projects what we are doing not just limited to cost savings. Even the CIOs now focused on the projects which results in revenue generation. So CIOs, taking a role of are championing the change. While championing the change, we are working. The CIOs are working with other business leaders to transform their division, their department, and their businesses to move towards the digital future. So, as a change agent in the organization, the CIO is playing a critical role, and also he is redefining and reimagining his role in the last 5 years, adopting the technologies, adopting the disruptions in the business, and applying these technologies to address those disruptions. So the CIO role is one of the key CXO roles, which has changed drastically in the last 5 years. Unlike other CXOs, or whether it is in supply chain or any other functions. So when it comes to AI and big data, as I said, right, everyone started, the digital transformation. Maybe some are in the initial phases, some are in, later stages. But this ecosystem, the digitization or digital relationships, right, whether it is with our partners or whether it is with our missions, we started generating volumes of data in the last few years, in the recent years. So this data, is giving us an opportunity to get best insights out of this data. So when big data is going to really play an important role to manage these volumes of data, while AI can help us to get insights out of this data. And machine learning or the deep learning can help us to personalize, our offerings to the customers. So when I say AI, I'm not talking about one particular technology. It is a set of technologies. We'll be applying these, technologies to improve our productivity, yield, and also the customer experience. So if you see what is achieved in the last 2 3 years, like if you see the recent report from Global Data, the pharmaceutical filings, if you see in the last 5 years, there is big data mentioning. The big data mentioning is increased 64%. So that means most of the pharmaceutical companies, when they are filing quarterly, annually, even in their sustainability reports, they started talking about big data and AI. So that is increased 64% in the last 4 to 5 years. Another aspect, like a British startup company, I think Exintia, has developed a drug, a molecule, it's called like DSP-18 or whatever, is developed in 12 months. Generally, all of us know how much time it takes to do a drug development, and the cost is involved. So they could reach to phase 1 trials in just 12 months. And the same company, I believe very recently, has signed with Sanofi to develop cancer drugs. So that is the kind of impact AI is creating. And another one, what you all might have heard about, the Google's, the DeepMind's AI algorithm has started, discovering the protein patterns, which was not at all possible. So that is, going to really, help our industry, much better ways. So there are, companies who started, reaping the benefits out of this AI and big data investments, and and as you know, the adoption is at multiple levels. First the companies explore, try to understand the limitations of the technology like AI, big data. Then they started finding candidates, where they can apply this technology, and also parallelly they create the culture. Right? It is not easy to replace AI. There is a perception that AI is more, replacing the humans with machines, but that is not about AI. AI is going to create the collaboration between machines and the humans. So we need to start looking at in that perspective. So cultural transformation, again, very important. CIOs are going to play a critical role in championing the change from this adoption of these technologies in a positive way. And finally, we need to operationalize this AI. How do we make this AI, how do we put AI to work, whatever we learned. So this is the adoption cycle of AI. So in the near, I think in the future, I think we'll continue to invest in drug development. Generally, it takes years. So we need to, early stages of drug development, I'm sure AI and big data will play an important role. And also not limited to that, it gives us, a mechanism to see through data. Today, if scientists or anyone wanted to see through data, for example, to figure out a medical failures, for example, a painkiller, how it is impacting a set of humans, or how it is impacting or creating some anomalies. So it is very difficult today, to see across the world, how it is being impacted. But when we have the data, we can see through the data and we can take some, corrective measures. The same, another one is the population health. How the environment is impacting, why diabetes is more in India, and what could be done. So there are ways and which, when we have access to data and applying technologies like AI, machine learning, would help us to figure out ways to improve the quality of life of humans, streaming. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Pavithan. I think so. And to summarize, you covered up on big data is more than 64%. It helps you to file the products, and then overall the cycle can be reduced. The speed of commercialization from R&D to the product will help with an AI and the technologies, and the deep drive and adoptions will be help us. Thanks you, Pavithan. So I did to go on the same, stay on the same question, and then try to understand from Atul's perspective. Atul, can you give your views on how the AI and big data helps as an industry and how the changes is embarked on, especially on your area?
I think, Srini, the impact of digital technologies, right? And when we say digital technologies, right, let's let's understand what these digital technologies entail. That entails your artificial intelligence, machine learning, cognitive learning. That entails your big data slash smart analytics. That entails your new age computing, such as cloud and all that kind of stuff, right? And social media and Internet of Things. Those are the digital technologies. Now, look around us. What is happening, right? Um, look at the numbers. World population of 8 billion. Of that, almost 5 billion smartphones, right? More than 14 billion mobile devices on this earth, right? Close to 1 billion wearable sensors. Could you imagine what is all happening? And look at the kind of the medical device that we're talking about, software as a medical device, right? An application for a medical device, biosensors and everything. I mean, this impact is tremendous, right? This is what digital transformation is all about, right? Now there are various ways, various definitions you can talk about digital transformation, but but if you see, you called about the two names, right? So one is the AI and the other one is the big data. Now let me put it this way. The way I see it is, I mean, artificial intelligence is the marching force for a digital transformation, right? And data is the fulcrum of the digital transformation lever. Without, um, sorry, am I audible, guys, or have I lost you, Srini?
No, no, you're good, Atul. Please proceed. Yeah.
I'm good. Okay, because I mean, I'm no more hearing the background noise. Okay.
No, I kept myself mute. Yeah. So
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So artificial intelligence and big data. You mentioned about these two names or technologies or terms, right? I mean, they are phenomenal, right? Look around us. Look in the retail industry. Look at the Walmart or the Home Depot. Look at the Google, what they're doing, right? I mean, Alexa, Siri, or Google, or what about the Google Assistant, right? These are all examples, very good examples of artificial intelligence, right? They don't mimic a human being, but they do what they are told, right? Simple algorithms, and they do it, right? And then they are told to learn from various examples. They keep on learning. They keep on learning, and that's how it becomes. Now there were reasons, right? Now we all need to understand, right? Digital transformation or AI, or the use of AI, or the churning of the data, right, is no more a privilege for any organization. It is a must. It is a must to do, right? You can't stay away from it. The choice is yours, right? And it is going to happen. It is going to happen. It is going to take the industry. It is already taking the industry by storm, and it is going to happen. Now the point is, in a very risk-averse industry such as pharma, how soon it happened. Now I will tell you about what was the reason in our pharma. Now I can speak from the perspective of service provider, and then we have got customers who are pharma companies, right? Now, what is the reason how is AI changing the landscape, or big data, or the data changing the landscape in our area of pharmacovigilance? Now, everyone, all of we understand what pharmacovigilance is all about, right? It's all about talking. It's all about learning about the drug efficacy, verifying and doing the troubleshooting, which is a diagnostic of a case provided. In pharmacovigilance, now we have got systems, right? Case processing systems, which are AI powered, right? Which are AI powered, which supports RPA, and some of the vendors even claim that they have got their systems cognitive computing. Now, cognitive computing is a way ahead. Talk about what cognitive computing is all about. I can tell you IBM Watson, which can think about like a human, and when humans start thinking, it's more of a complex process. It's when humans starts thinking, it's about what should we do about it. Correct? What should we do about it? Most of the tools, artificial intelligence can come to a point where it can do, a data science modeling, which is the predictive modeling over there. So, we look at these case processing systems powered by AI, artificial intelligence, and all those kinds of stuff, and they, our case processing cycle time has reduces by 30 to 50%, somewhere between that. Now, that's a huge cost reduction, right? That's a huge efficiency gain, and you can apply those efficiency in different areas. Now, that's one example of how AI is helping us. Now, talk about the RP. I already talked about the RP, right? You pick up the cases from different sources, natural language processing. Now this is becoming more and more mature, right? And this is where NLP and your cognitive company comes into play. You do robotic process automation. What used to take 10 minutes for each case to enter, now it takes hardly what 1 minute to do. And then certain point in time, 3 years, 4 years down the line, we are talking about doing touchless case processing, a kind of cases, they flow through the system, without being touched. And that is happening, right? There are various examples. There are various examples around us. Big data at the same time, it's very critical. You generate the big data. I mean, data is all around us. Some generate the data, some cannot generate, some do not generate the data. Some generate meaningful data, but are unable to leverage it, right? There are data in structured format, there are data in unstructured format. You got to leverage that data. Otherwise, it's very difficult. Now, how do you think what Pavitra just mentioned about, Sanofi, researching a drug in a researching a drug, right? In a span of 12 months or whatever it is. That is again done by AI. The molecular composition of a chemical, how that chemical is going to perform in a drug, right? That's done by the AI thing. And 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 look around us. The kind of software we are available. People don't even have to call the customer care or something. Everything is available at the click of a button, right? Look at the various apps. People are connecting with other peers, other patients, trying to understand the symptoms of the disease and the cures and all that kind of stuff. So, it's just a matter of time when you recognize it, and how you embrace and implement AI and big data into your organizational uh, technology roadmap. Right now, technology is no longer a silo, as Pulsar mentioned. It's no longer a silo. It is now. It has to be integrated with the business, and in certain organizations where it is already integrated with the business, they have an integrated business IT roadmap. That's all I want to say.
No, thank you, thank you, Atul, for taking us through overall all the technologies and how they play a key role in especially transforming the organization in pharmaceutical. Thank you. The next, I will still stay on the data. I'll go to Yogesh. Yogesh, will you believe effective utilization of a data can lead to an agile operating models? If you say yes, then can you just give us what is your perspective towards
Sure.
this?
Thanks, Srini. Well, let me start by answering yes, I do believe so. And uh, before I go into it, although a lot of us know about data, my co-panelists talked about effective utilization of data for AI. Let me just touch briefly upon data before I go into some more detail. See, today, data has become a core strategic asset in most organizations, and data management has become a top priority for most of the business leaders. We have structured data and unstructured data, which companies have been collecting from their processes, from people, And all of this can reveal areas which could help in making the processes more efficient, and most importantly, help the business leaders in making better decisions, which would ultimately reduce the overall organizational risk. Data is the cornerstone upon which companies are launching their digital transformations, investing in analytic capabilities, machine learning, robotics, and several other technologies. Right. So when we talk about data or efficient data, one of I would also like to touch upon it, that it would mean that the new concept of agile data, right? And how do you get to efficient data or agile data? I would say, an approach to that agile data would necessarily rely on several core principles and organizational capabilities. First is a business-driven approach to the digital transformation, and hence to data migration and management. Under this approach, companies could create a master list of possible business use cases for advanced analytics, as well as opportunities for new or enhanced products and processes too. Take the inventory of the different type of data associated with these use cases and opportunities, and during this identify the most important characteristics and activities across a range of business domains. In pharma, typically because of the nature of the process and compliance, we have usually seen that a humongous amount of data is generated, right? This data, uh, one of my colleagues, just co-panelists, touched upon it, could be in silos and not being utilized effectively. So if this data is managed, is this efficient data or agile data is available, definitely we will be able to build agile operating models, right? One of the examples I could think about is, think about in QC, your in-process samples which get analyzed, right? So typically there could be OS, OT, which is a long drawn process and it's quite time consuming. This needs to be resolved in real time data insights for multiple level of decision making, as well as data capturing and linking, if available, could be a big help, right? Having efficient data would enable real-time trend analysis for decision making for the OT. Thus not only saving the time, but also bringing in a lot of accuracy into the process of OT and bringing in automated compliance, right? Similar to QC, there could be other areas like manufacturing, which could be an opportunity for with efficient data to build an agile operating model. Uh, a very basic example, your MES is capturing a lot of data with regards to your batch execution, and then you have your L2 integrations, which the L2 integrations actually have a lot of humongous amount of data which gets captured, probably stored in a historian somewhere. All of this data is there, but it's not available in the right way, or companies at times are not harvesting it in the right way, right? If this is provided in an efficient way, a lot of decision making could be done in a very agile model, what we talk about, the agile operating model, right? So if it is made in a way that this is provided for instant analysis, you could analyze for process inefficiencies, real-time process inputs or warnings, and most importantly, better batch planning, right? Which would help overall your productivity. So these are a couple of examples I can see where your efficient data would definitely bring in an agile operating model and add value to the overall organizational process. Before I close off on this, when we talk about efficient data and or agile data, I would like to highlight one critical principle of agile data, which is joint ownership. Typically, we have seen the interaction between the business units and the IT organization in most companies, which is typically limited to business requests and IT solutions thrown at each other, right? And usually there is this invisible wall between the two, and it's not a very good scenario. So, to successfully deploy an efficient and agile data approach, representatives from business side need to be physically sitting with with members of the IT organization, like your agile model in IT, where you have all your SMEs coming together in a similar fashion. Having them in the same room could help break down cultural barriers. And business people can learn more about technology. IT managers may be exposed to more on the different elements of business. Most importantly, joint ownership of data migration and data management protocols can help the organization define just-in-time data requirements, quickly validate the business case and propose solutions. Rather than waiting for the typical age-old ways of approvals to cascade through traditional channels, and assure quality of the solution. That's it from my side. Thanks.
Thanks, Yogesh. Well said. And I think, yeah, you just touched about the structure and a structure of the data, and you brought an agile data structure. And also, you well said, it's any digital transformation initiatives, along with the data, it has to be co-created along with the business because they were the consumer of the data and we are the enabler of the data. So that's where how it comes. And well said. Thank you, Yogesh. I'd like to move on to Vivek. I think we all experienced this, and everybody can speak. When the COVID hit us in a couple of months ago, the entire business has been disrupted with the lockdowns and the offices getting shut down. And then I think most of the IT teams came up and enabled people to work on remotely and stuff like that. And also, our like Atul did briefly talked about an RPA and stuff. So just wanted to understand from you does the automation will play a key role in a future if we have I'm not wishing to have a similar COVID situation, but if we have a similar kind of any disruption happens because of any infectious diseases and then business disrupts, what do you feel that how much the automation will help and how does it can reduce overall disruption to the businesses? Vivek, you are muted. If you can unmute,
Can you
thank
hear
you.
me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Perfect. So a very interesting question, and I believe one learning we have from the COVID situation is that we should not await a COVID-like situation again. But what we've learned from it is that ability to have a vaccine out and being in use by human beings in maybe a span of less than 12 months, right? And if that is the learning that we can take away, I think what it basically saying is that it has for the first time maybe broken a mindset change for both the regulator as well as us as the pharmaceutical organization, that we have the ability to accelerate output of a new molecular entity and be able to drive accelerated compliance and therefore regulatory approvals and ensure that we are able to take it to the market at a very fast pace. Now, what it means is that typically an NME till now was something like $1 billion plus spend, and by the time you recover the cost of that, you typically are moving it into a generic and leading to therefore loss in the revenue per sale that happens. Now you have an ability to do that cycle much faster. I think that could be a very large commercial gain that we see from the situation. But I may potentially maybe weave this answer back into maybe RPA and therefore related areas by going back to a point that was made by Yogesh, and that point was typically around the collaboration. Because see, whatever said and done, if we were to look at today, lab information management system during the R&D phase to maybe, for example, a MES in the manufacturing side to basically the operation technology around maybe controlling of environmental constraints and so on and so forth to maybe, for example, a warehousing technology to things such as cold chains and therefore distribution. All of these are typically driven off a series of applications, and to a large extent, a lot of these are siloed. And I think whatever we say may be the case, this data silo is still a nemesis for most of the companies that we operate with. Fortunately for me, what has happened is that because I came from the discipline of an enterprise architect, which is typically my core foundation, data architecture and the inconsistency that exists that leads to the such silos. And I think somebody's asked a question, how do you ensure they break this, is all driven on the fact that there should be this interface sitting between technology and business to be able to make this interpretation clear, to be able to establish these mapping principles based on which typical data transformation gets done. So we all talk about ETLs and everything, but when we talk about silo data generation and we say how much data getting from all these different systems, disparate systems, uh, there is somebody who needs to ensure that there is that commonality element that gets seen so that it can be leveraged for decision support. I think that's very interesting place that I've worked with, especially around understanding the underlying data architectures, looking at the inconsistencies that exist, uh, go ahead and create data transformation mapping structures, run transformation engines on top of it, maybe create data lakes, and start looking at a possible analysis of a cross-section view here. Right now, like a lot of time we can say that all the thing leading up to creation of that output is has to be a combination of a machine plus man. But generation of such outputs, creation of alerts, ensuring that these alerts are taken into actual decision support, whether it's a manufacturing time, whether it's to correct a OT alert coming in through maybe one of your SCADA systems, whatever, is driven off a lot of automation. And I think that's a beautiful opportunity that we see there, especially between the IT OT, for looking at a possibility of driving automation and things like that. Now, underlying that also today, you don't really have to do a lot of this mining activity yourself, or a lot of this data architecture creation yourself. We have now we've successfully tested a lot of tools, especially with emerging technologies around business process modeling notation, and therefore the generated data that comes out of it is the ability to start using, for example, process mining and task mining tools, not only to look at process and task debottlenecking, but also more to understand the underlying data structures and try to see if we can bring in consistencies around the same. Now, a few interesting cases I would want to maybe bring here of work that I've personally done, especially around this particular space. So I think one very interesting piece of work that I've done is like, say, today a pharma organization don't just look at pharma as a product output. They look at what typically somebody will call it as a pill plus, or somebody may talk about it as going beyond just selling the medicine and see how the efficacy and everything comes into play. Now, if you take this, say, two steps back during the R&D phase, so one interesting piece of work that I did was where working with one of the customers that I engaged with as a consultant, I helped maybe create a common harmonized codification system for them, which was basically an aggregation of a disease classification engine, a symptom classification engine, corresponding test and lab test that gets done as a part of maybe the whole evolution cycle, and finally looking at the typical therapeutic impact that may be caused of it. The very interesting piece that kind of came out of that was one, especially in the clinical trials part, our ability to do, say, patient cohorts. And patient cohorts typically are driven off, especially in that stage, around drug resistance, toxicities, and so on and so forth. And a lot of time, these are enabled through the biomarkers, through this basic data infrastructure that gets created, which is basically using the standardized data set. And I think that had set the tone for a very significant personalized medicine approach for that particular piece of work. Now, when we look at that, it has its direct flow into maybe, for example, what Yogesh brought out around population health. So, because these are nothing but then reflections of cohorts in real life, in when a patient is out in the street, and you are able to say, okay, a typical therapeutic process for this patient should be, say, a sequence of this protocol A, B, C, D, and that is possible through, if you as a pharma organization in the earlier part of the life cycle would have done this definition of cohorts and created biomarkers and I think that's a very, very interesting case. And therefore, some of this now can be started to be put under the observation of, say, a robotic process automation. Till now, it has to be completely done by machines and look at alerts and so on and so forth. But now you can actually start looking at bringing in RPA in this particular space. So an interesting case that we did there was, and I think Atul brought that point about pharmacovigilance, right? So this is one area which is very close to my heart, primarily because of the fact that, if you remember, when I introduced myself, I mentioned that I have worked in the validation space and particularly in the pharma quality space and the pharma compliance space a lot. Is very interesting because uh, not just the act of adverse event tracking that goes into a pharmacovigilance approach, but it is a combination of multiple things. It's a combination of, for example, your OT technologies during the production and ensuring that they are maintaining the parameters as specified. The fact that goes a step behind to the actual manufacturing setup being put in play. And today, I think we are talking about aspects of digital twins being brought in, right? Because they start bringing in some level of correlation to be able to provide input to the regulator for potentially getting early and faster sign-offs, as a case in point. And last but not the least, all of this has to tie it into a common quality management system in the organization, which means that you can not say that, okay, my LIMS is sitting, my lab information management system is sitting separately somewhere, and somebody will manually input data from there, and then somebody manually data from, maybe for example, the trials phase and everything else, and finally it'll go for a closure for NCR, and maybe no 486 is to be given, and so on and so forth. All that, to a large extent now, if integrated, can be handed over, like the whole aspect of auditing, the whole aspect of maybe threshold tracking, whole aspect of looking at out of trend thresholds, and so on and so forth, can be now given to a machine to start looking at it, and only exceptions are what humans will come and play. So humans are not going away, but humans are now doing a lot of what they are supposed to do, the quotient of thinking, rather than maybe the quotient of just aggregating data, which is what we see in most of the times. We'll have large data center teams, data teams who are sitting and just doing punching out data. I think that's typically where we see aggregation, a role of an RPA and e-workers coming in and taking up a lot of this task, and ensuring that exception, the management by exception rule finally can be implemented in an organization. So these are some very interesting anecdotes of real work that we have done. And I think while we may see there are examples of things being done by Novartis and equivalent, there's a partner that I work with in India where we are building ML models around pattern recognition, predicting a target protein formation to automate the entire drug discovery phase. Now, if you were to look at it, finally, what does it mean? It means that there's a visual view of a cell, and when you implement a trial drug onto it, the molecular entity onto it, it behaves in a particular way. A lot of times that is done through a visual capture. So almost like the way we are tagging today on Facebook and Instagram and other things, there's an ability to tag such things at a cellular level, and be able to therefore see, based on the cohort, what's the kind of impact happening at the cell level, based on maybe the definition of the patient cohort. And this is something which is purely driven on top of maybe a very strong ML and a deep neural network engine that has been put together. So, and these are realities not in the Western world or not anywhere else. These are all happening in India and with partners out of India. And I think we therefore, just to conclude, while automation has a role to play multiple places over, automation has to be supported by a very perfectly engineered data management platform, which has the ability to maybe break those silos and talk across. And most importantly, a series of predefined thresholds and logic sets which have to be brought in play, so as the machine can therefore take actions to alert, include humans where needed, and so on and so forth. So those are a few examples of some real life work that I've done personally over the last maybe 17, 18 years, especially with the pharma organization. And I think therefore that rolls out a very exciting view of what we're going to see now.
Thank you, Vivek. I think you touched based on more of a mindset change towards automation. As you rightly said, the automation is not going to take away any employee or human being doing. They'll be help us to do more intelligent and more efficiently the way they've been performing it. And the one thing is rightly said, and you all believe in that. The COVID has taught us many lessons. Especially the one thing you especially said is a vaccine can be from the R&D stage to till the commercialization can be done from 3 to 9 months. Why we used to take for six years as five and above years. That the what is the mindset, and then it has been challenging ourselves towards the digitization automations. Thank you, Vivek. And I'd like to stay on the same topic, and I'd like to go on to Pavitran to ask more on with all these the changes and the business. So you, as I said, the vaccine can be produced in 3 to 6 months, and then get a regulatory approval in 9 months. So what you think, and what are the focus area that need to be focused on for aligning the business process to the dynamically altering the pharma sector, especially like let's look at a vaccine which is brought up in 6 to 9 months, and so similarly, what do you think a business processes that should be altered, towards with respect to are focusing on?
Yeah, sure, Srini. Before answering to that, maybe I'll take a couple of questions from audience, the easy ones maybe. So I think someone asked about streamlining the data in pharma. So in my opinion, data streamlining is a challenge in any industry, especially in the manufacturing industry, not just limited to pharma, because the companies has grown in the last 20, 30 years in silos, maybe a lot of acquisitions in different geographies, and every department has their own Excel sheets. And considering pharma more regulated, we are paper driven in some of the departments. So as part of the digitization, now pharma started digitizing these manual processes. So what happens is, the biggest challenge for any company is to create a single source of truth. So how do we approach that? How do we make it happen? How do we, link your SKUs to material codes? And how do you create that kind of structured data in your organization? So that is, what probably using master data management, some of the industry proven solutions we have to adopt, and we have to have a better governance process. And you need to identify the custodians of that data in different departments, and have more better governance and monitoring process. So it takes time. Always anything new you are doing is easy, but how do you clean the data is the very biggest challenge, because you already have transactions to that. You cannot consolidate 5 customer records into one. So there would be a lot of challenges. It's case by case, and definitely across the industry these challenges are there. So better governance and tools like MDM would definitely help us. I think a lot of manual effort is involved. And the next question, how can massive amounts of data to be turned into insights? See, we need to be very
Pavitra,
clear.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Pavitra. I think probably can get this once we're done with our questions which are set,
Yeah,
and then we can back to the other panelists to have these questions done. I think we probably
sure,
have
sure.
some time for us, so probably we should be able to good with the time. Yeah.
Sure, Srini. Thanks for the alert. I think going back to your question, right? First, we need to understand what can be disrupted in the pharma industry, right? So, if you see in the last 1 2 years, what is more disrupted is the supply chain due to COVID or due to whatever reasons. The weak link in the pharma or any industry is the supply chain. Otherwise, when we have the right material at the right time in the right place, I think you will be able to work on those products or the offerings, whatever you are committed to the customer. So we need to see how we can improvise on the supply chain management. How do we track and create more visibility from end to end? And if you foresee any challenges with your supply chain, with vendors, how do you create alternate options? I think that is one of the key, like for example, during the COVID +1 strategy, it was very popular, right? That really helped India, and also helped India to get more business to India, because China +1 strategy. So these things, we should continue to invest and partner with our supply chain teams, and see how technology can be an enabler, to address those supply chain concerns. And then from the technology point of view, right, these days, lot of talk about blockchain. How do we use blockchain technologies to streamline the supply chain? It doesn't just focus on the gaps in the supply chain. It also brings transparency, and it also address some counterfeiting medicines or whatever. So there are many advantages with the blockchain. And the other aspect is, we need to continue to automate our factories, right? The factory automation is an important aspect of industry 4.2 or factory 4.0. We need to improve on go to market strategy by automating the factories, especially the industrial automation, along with the RPAs, what my co-panelists mentioned already. So these, the two areas, and also while we are working on the supply chain side, we also should, see how we can apply these technologies like AI to, better forecast the demand and manage our inventories, because inventories, we cannot just pile up by as part of the supply chain strategy. We need to be still lean so that we can protect our working capital. So that's very briefly, Srini. Yeah.
Thank, thank you, Parthen.
Yeah.
I think we have 10 minutes. Probably we can just quickly go through a couple of one more question, and then we'll start an audience question. Audience will respond to that. Vivek, do you have any say on this? What are the focus on the business process, that aligning the business processes to focus on that, and the quick views from your end?
Yeah, I think obviously Mr. Pavitran has kind of laid out a very interesting fabric here for us to kind of take forward key directions, drive factory automation, ensure that there is a very intrinsic supply chain connect, and so on and so forth. Some very interesting cases that we can look at. So, for example, there is obviously this whole aspect of counterfeit management, and counterfeit management typically driven of things such as packaging and packaging related information kind of that goes into it, besides obviously certain other elements. Good control point there could be done through amalgamation of maybe basically a batch correlation to the to for example, maybe let's say a QR code and equivalent that goes into the packaging, and therefore maybe start looking at using blockchain and doing a digital fingerprinting on each package side that goes in. And you don't have to therefore do a very human intensive work here, but you can actually start doing machine intensive work and only look at, as I mentioned to you, management by exception. Look at all things that are not matching the digital fingerprinting which has been done. It's a process which is already operational. It's a process that can be easily deployed, and today fortunately for us, it has been designed in such a way that looks at unit economics. So per digital fingerprinting typically has been brought down into paisas, and which basically means that your cost per drug sale doesn't really go up. That means the impact on the customer paying out higher for maybe using something of the nature typically does not go very higher. So that's very interesting piece that we've done. And another part that I would kind of bring up here is so while there was a brief mention about by Mr. Yogesh on the IT/OT construct, especially because a lot of data generated from the operational technologies has to be brought in sync, not just from an aspect of a regulator sign up, but also to be able to bring in controls during the process of manufacturing. Now, this is something which, without a very well thought out strategy, still continues to be two different silos of activities. So, IT managed by a very different entity in the organization, OT managed by a very different entity in the organization, and the ability to correlate them becomes an issue. So, it goes back to the first point I mentioned on the process part. This whole intelligence around using OT and bringing that as an input for decision support is a very interesting and important part. And there are technologies that have been made available today where this can be implemented, and these technologies now are affordable in a sense that can be placed in play. And the last point I just want to bring in is the sales and operation planning, SNOP, has been a major bane for this industry, because if you were to look at it, such a fragmented distributor ecosystem and a supplier ecosystem, and hospitals having disparate systems and no lack of interconnectivity across between them, basically say that 30% of the large institutional buyers visibility is not available in a single place. The remaining 70% is anyway fragmented. So there are two very interesting things that have been done. One, maybe from StratMed standpoint, what we have done is we are trying to bring together. So today, for example, we've been operational for about 3 years. Operationally today, we are passed through our network of hospitals about $250 million worth of purchases are flowing through. And obviously this number has to go up, especially if you look at maybe some of the markets like US. Almost 95% of all critical drugs typically get routed through a GPO. Now, what it means is it basically means an ability to give an aggregated view to the manufacturer on being able to do a better planning. At least for 5 key critical manufacturers, we've been able to impact anywhere between a 2 to 5% improvement in the on the inventory holding cost by just doing a better SNOP as a case in point. So that's driven off aggregation and technology. That's basically more a collaboration across the ecosystem. And the second interesting part that is there is this whole aspect of utilizing of, say, for example, RPAs, especially what happens, the medical rep goes on a beat to a end sell point, and you may potentially touch one chemist to the next chemist maybe every 15 days, or maybe you may touch a doctor to a next doctor maybe 15-20 days, but there's a gap that happens in between. So we typically, to be able to maybe go and collect an order, to be able to ensure the order gets channelized, we have piloted in 2 cities an ability to go to kind of install a RPA agent on top of a typical billing system in the chemist and focus on maybe, for example, the top 20% critical moving items, and see, can we bring in a better ordering cycle there by a RPA agent sitting and ordering on behalf of the chemist rather than maybe somebody to come and take an order on. So what it has done is it helps you to reduce the number of touch points and footprint on the field. But more, what it does is it kind of gives the manufacturer ability to get a view of consumption in a time shorter than 15-20 days, which is typically the interface between one touch point to the next touch point. And I think that real-time movement in stock can really start giving better visibility for better planning. I'll kind of stop there with respect to maybe the question that you asked.
No, thank you, Vivek. Thank you very much. So this is my the final question. I think maybe Yogesh and Atul can just give a views. And as we all believe, and most of the panelists spoke about, and automation is the way that going forward in the business. And what are the challenges, possible challenges towards automation you probably echo on, and what could be the solution towards those challenges? I know, like resistance or whatever it is coming from the business. I think Yoga spoke about it has to be a collaborative way of getting the digital transformation done. Towards automation, what are those challenges you come up? You find possible challenges, and then what could be the solution way forward? If you can throw your light on to the audience.
Sure. I think Vivek already touched on some of the issues, but if I have to just pick 2 or 3 challenges which are there, I think primarily, see, somebody just mentioned that pharma, we guys are traditionally a very risk-averse industry, right? And we are not ready to accept change quickly for a very good reason, right? Anything goes wrong with the production, a batch even goes wrong, right? The production fails, the cost can be in millions, right? So one is the cost involved to it, and second is the amount of compliance which is there in our industry. I don't think it's there as much in the other industries. So which is why we tend to be more cautious in terms of moving into the unknown, right? So that I think is the first challenge. So to expand on that, you talk about unfamiliarity of the technology. So even if you take, I know a lot of companies have started looking at AI, but for a lot of companies, AI is still like a black box, right? Owing to its newness and its historic nature, it's like this magic thing. So it's still a very new area, very unfamiliar area for a lot of companies. Secondly, even if they want to do it in a space where compliance is required, how would you even validate this AI with the complexities like learning levels, changes in the data? This would bring such a high level of complexity in your validations as well as reproducing that data, right? So this is one of the challenges, and I guess with CSA or computer system assurance, the new way it's going to come, that may make things easier. But primarily, I think for this, the CIO needs to bring about a lot of increase in knowledge within the organization. That's, I think, how we could probably rise above this. But that's one of the key things. The second, which I feel, which Vivek spoke about, is the data silos and streamlining your electronic records. Right? It's been spoken throughout this, and I think it's very, very critical. We all see that most of the data being in free text format, or even if it's in a structured format, your data management is messy and unorganized across heterogeneous databases, right? So it means that we need to go above and beyond to collate and put this data into a standard form that can be analyzed. So Vivek and Pavitran spoke about it a bit, so I don't want to go much into detail, but I think this is the second key challenge which is there, right? And the third, which may not feel like a big challenge, but the existing IT infrastructure
Yogesh, you are with me?
a challenge, right? And your infrastructure may also be old. For example, you may not have the right infrastructure for AI and you need to upgrade it, which is a cost. How do you convince the management to put into this cost for something which is a relatively new or unknown technology and not that well proven? Right, in my mind, probably build effective business cases with a plan and a ROI, and start with a pilot project, and build, that's, I think, the right way to build that confidence and get the, share the knowledge within the organization and take it from there.
No, thank you, Yogesh. I think there's a question also on the similar, but since Atul, you don't need to answer this
Mhm.
question, but similar question from the audience. What are the challenges and enablers in the digital transformation in pharma? If you can just take us
Okay.
through.
Uh, so I would like to begin with this. The challenges itself present an opportunity, right? The way you start. If you start seeing the challenges, right, then you'll be beating around the bush. So my advice to everyone out over there is see digital transformation, right, as an opportunity, to improve, to bring a new change within the organization, right? Number one. Number two, don't think digital transformation is going to happen overnight. Three, don't try to do it big bang. Most of the people do big bang. Now, the biggest challenge, well, the challenge that really exists over there, right? And when people try to do it all by themselves is a lack of skill and experience, which is not having the desired knowledge and the lack of experience, past experience, right? That you should not be trying to do it all alone, right? You need to bring on board a digital transformation consultant who could guide you, who could help you define the transformation roadmap, right? Now, and most importantly, how do you drive this digital transformation? Now, if you try to do it all by yourself, appoint a single person, give him the power CDO, right, and ask him to go there and hunt it, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. There has to be a way. It needs to have the sponsorship blessings. It needs to have the message from the top, and it needs to have a digital spot from each and every team, a digital teams from each and every team, right? And this person whom you're talking about, whom you're giving the mandate, right? He needs to have that power to expand within the organization, to expand its reach within the organization. Now, you like it, we like it, or we don't like it, right? uh, we operate, most of the organization operate in silos, right? Forget about the FANGs, the Facebook, Google. And now let me tell you, digital transformation didn't came to pharmaceutical industry. Digital transformation came from these industries, and now we are looking at what change digital transformation has brought around, and we are trying to learn from it. So the best learning is always going to come around us, right? I know that these compliance or regulatory pressures, they make us risk averse, and it is the case with everyone. But you look at the FDA, they have implemented the AI powered robotic process automation powered case processing system, right? The change is happening. The change is happening. The change is no nobody stops you, right? Now, if so, as I told you, you got to break this digital silos, and you have to create a conduit, right? The basis of digital transformation is unified data, right? Unified processes, okay, and then the computing technologies. You cannot do it all by yourself. Now, if somebody asks the question, what do I, how do I bring insight from the massive amounts of data? So that's where the problem, the start. You are starting on a wrong foot. You are taking the right step for wrong foot forward. If you try to do digital transformation or try to derive insights out of the data without, you are going to end up with something. You're going to end up with something that may or may not serve the purpose. But by the way, you haven't defined the purpose at all before you started even doing it. Right now, my
Right.
my solution is, you first decide the problem, put the anchor around the problem, and then define the KPIs, and then start seeing it where the data exists, and how do I need to bring that data into a data lake, and what messaging has to be done. Otherwise, 90% of the time you will end up in getting the data and massaging the data to get to a point, but you would not know what do I do with the data, what actions do I take with the data. Now, as Vivek mentioned, he worked with one of the partners, and he created an aggregated view of symptom, the contextual things, right? And that resulted into finding out the patterns, right? Now he might have, now there are ways of doing it. He might have, you know lakhs and lakhs of, records out over there. It is manually impossible, correct? It is manually impossible. So he started, or the company started with the purpose, what we have to do, and they started working in that area. So that's how it's going to be. Now, cost, right? When you try to do all these things, right, it is complex and it is costly, right? But it has a purpose. If you don't have a strategic purpose, digital transformation is of no use. And most of the time, people will end up with doing, I'm telling you, piecemeal automation, just piecemeal automation, process engineering, without even those catapulting into a big results. What is happened most of the time, and I shouldn't say, there are other forces as well that's out of your control, right? Somebody doesn't want it because he sees his power is getting, weakened up, loosened up. He won't support you. But without money spending, without sponsorship support, and without a vision where I want to be 2 years down the line, what I want to achieve, you can't even get your cost approved. So for God's sake, this is not, people confuse digital transformation with digitization. No, that is not. Digitization is making one odd process, onto the portal and doing the transaction. That is digitization. It doesn't result into any customer experience management. It doesn't result into creating value for your customer. It doesn't grow your business, right? So please, do not mistake digitization with digital transformation. I would say that. I would
No,
end
thank
up
you.
saying that.
Thank you, Atul. I think you answered most of the questions, but again, I'll put like there's a very interesting question about, do you believe that now that the pharma sector is moving towards a digital first strategy? Is I think anybody can pick this question and answer, or
I would just add to it, and then I would hand it over to my fellow panelists. So look at Vivek Mahindra, the example he quoted. Lots of things happening within India itself, right? Now there are statistics. I don't know about the real ground life situation in India when clinical trial happened, but but patients prefer mobile trials, or where they don't have to visit the hospitals or the labs. They prefer those kinds of trials, right? Against, and they win by other traditional trials by a huge margin, correct? Pharma companies during the COVID times, right? They needed a mechanism to share their new business strategies, new product ideas across their healthcare professionals along with their partners. How did they did it? Through digital materials, right? We are already seeing how medical representatives, are doing their beats, right? It's all collaboration. They don't want to visit the doctors or chemists anymore. They want to collaborate it. Now, some of the organizations are really trying to understand how a day in the life of a medical representative would be, right? 2 years down the line, right?
yeah.
I
Thank you,
mean, I
Atul.
mean, ima- Yeah, that's where I would like to stop. So I think organizations are realizing, and you heard the example. They have to move towards it. It's slow, but we will be there.
Right. So you say that the pharma is now moving towards digital first strategy. That's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
COVID
Any
after
views?
COVID. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Atik. Any views from Vivek, Pavitran, and Yogesh?
I think see digital. I think digital first is the fad word these days, and so therefore anybody say yes, that is happening. Unfortunately, in reality, I think that correlation between strategy and operation to achieve digital, right, is still a significant gap. Less than maybe 40-45% of all ecosystem organizations have really put that together. So yes, while that's an approach, it's still some time away. And as rightly said, one single failure in the market, basically the company is set back by maybe a decade. So that's the risk that we are trying to counter, and therefore it has to be a process. It cannot be an overnight journey.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Vivek. Um, I'll go on then. I think the other question is very interesting. A digital transformation are gaining momentum. How can a cloud cost overrun be prevented in the pharma sector? I think now, again, most of the companies now started going a cloud first strategy and they try to move all the workloads to the cloud. I think just wanted to have a views on how do we can optimize the cost towards the cloud, when we want to move the workloads to the cloud. And views or anybody has done.
So, Srini, I think cloud can bring more, speed and scale to the digital transformation. Generally, suppose, as we discussed, if we wanted to set up data lake, or if I wanted to have the complete data analytics platform, if I have to do on-prem, it is a time-consuming activity. So it is easy for us to do pilots in cloud and then, scale up. So that is one way, to approach cloud apart from doing other regular DR, BCP, other activities. That's briefly it.
I think one interesting piece that somebody has to think about here is that a lot of time now we are assuming cloud to be nothing but an on-prem server resource to be hosted on cloud, and typically that's where the costs go out of control. Cloud expects you to do aggregation. Cloud expects you to do maybe uh, pay as you use, and that you can do only by looking at the application layer and looking at transformation driven there, and not look at this to be a virtual machine instead of a physical machine sitting on the network. And if we can have that approach, I think that approach will always be beneficial in the long term. So this problem is more driven off an approach saying, okay, I have 10 physical servers here, I move 10 virtual machines on the cloud. Your cost will be very high because you pay for compute, you pay for storage, and you pay through your nose for IOPS. And which is where the cloud companies make their money. They don't make the money on just the storage and
Thanks, Vivek. I think that's where it comes. We probably need to at the design level, we probably might need to spend more time and get the consulting done, and then see that what the workload that you wanted to be used in cloud. It depends on what is our preference, right? You're looking at a gold standard, high availability, and as Pavitran said, the speed and those stuff like it makes sense to get in cloud. And there are some workloads that can stay on prem. That's how we have to
yeah.
optimize on the cloud. Right?
Right.
Thank you. I think, Garima, give me 1 minute. There's one question
Sure.
unanswered, and I think we are good on that. This is partially answered, but just I think more toward the clinical trial process. How has intelligent automation affected the clinical trial process? I think somebody, I did understand Vivek or somebody spoke about, or Atul spoke about this, but if you can just specifically answer this question.
So I think Atul just now mentioned about the fact that, see, especially to things such as adherence to the dosage and equivalent, and not to go to a hospital to get the medication done, are things that are put in play. But I think in reality that we are seeing today is in conjunction with, say, technologies such as blockchain, and conjunction with technologies such as the visual AI, visual and machine imaging processes, you have an ability to start bringing in the similar controls you typically get in a hospital. The only thing is, if the administration is oral, very easily done. If the administration is intravenous, you typically will have to definitely look at some kind of a clinical intervention. So we have to choose our candidates, but technologies today are available to bring in almost a real lab-like environment for you, bring in adherence, bring in calendarization, bring in camera-centric visual captures to do all those activities. That is actually happening as we speak now. But we have to choose our candidates very, very carefully in this particular space. So it
No,
cannot be
thank
just
you.
a
I
one
think.
answer saying that will work that way.
No, thank you, Vik. We are a little overrun on that time, and I really appreciate it. It shows that how passionate and you are in that the discussions has been overrun for 15 minutes. I would like to really apologize for the delay, but I think we should. It really benefited the audience, and that is good. Thank you very much, and really appreciate each one of you. Thank you. Over to
Absolutely,
you.
sir. Absolutely. I think it was, a very diversely, versatile discussion that we observed, and we thank you to our esteemed speakers who could join us, amidst their busy schedules and share their vision and thoughts. We would like to apprise our August gathering and to our delegates about two of our upcoming in-person events scheduled for the month of June. We will be organizing the 10th Healthcare Innovation Summit on 22nd, 23rd June at the Ross Hotel, New Delhi. We will also be having a parallel event, which is the third Radiology and Imaging Summit, also on the 22nd and the 23rd of June at Eros Hotel, New Delhi. And as a small token of appreciation from our end, please accept these virtual certificates from the organizers. Mr. Venkat Srinivas, thank you so much for steering the discussion and giving us a very insightful dissemination of information that we had from you and your co-panelists. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Pavitra Ayala. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today and giving us an insight into your thoughts with the gathering here. Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Atul Rastogi, VP and Head IT, is Absolute Life Sciences. Thank you, Mr. Rastogi. It was pleasure listening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Yogesh Deshpande, Head Operations IT, Alembic Pharmaceuticals Limited. Thank you, sir. We are really
Thank you.
indebted to you that you could join us today. And Mr. Vivek Mahindra, Chief Information Officer, Stratmed. Thank you so much, sir. It's always a pleasure to have you amongst us. So thank you so much to all my esteemed speakers. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks for that.